the updated figures and assured families that the government is expediting rescue and recovery operations. He urged residents living in high-risk areas to heed evacuation advisories and move to safer grounds to avoid further loss of life. Murkomen also expressed condolences to the bereaved families and commended the multi-agency teams involved in the operation, noting that both national and county emergency units alongside community volunteers are working tirelessly to locate missing persons and support affected households.
Tumepoteza 26 people ambao wamepatikana. Pia tumeambiwa ya kwamba watu 25 bado wamepotea na watu 26 ni wale ambao wamepelekwa kutibiwa hospitali. Our Ngao officers, our county commissioners, the regional commissioner is well briefed to make sure that we give out early warning and an alert to everybody to go to safe ground. Today, I think the search should be able to lead us to a number of persons who are missing. And you know, in law, you cannot say they are dead until they are established that that has happened. So the missing persons will continue being searched. It is very sad, by the way, that some families lost 5, 6, immediate family members. So it's not a very easy thing.
Those who have been injured, the government of Kenya is going to pay all the hospital bills. For those who have lost their lives, the families living, the government of Kenya is going to stand with all these families who are grieving at the moment to ensure we have a proper and decent send-off.
Now, more than 3,000 families in Kapumboi Ward, Kwanza constituency in Trans Nzoia County have been displaced after River Sabwani burst its banks following heavy rains in the area. The flooding has submerged homes and farmlands, leaving affected residents stranded and without shelter. Those displaced are now calling on the government and humanitarian agencies for urgent assistance, including food, temporary shelter, and relocation to safer areas. Residents have blamed the county government for failing to complete the construction of protective dikes along the river, a move they believe could have helped mitigate the effects of the floods.
Tatizo lilianza kitambo tangu tuishi mahali hapa. Tumelilia serikali ikakuja ikatuundia daiki. Na hiyo daiki ijamalisiwa. Mwakapatwa na hasara. Mboga zimeenda, chakula ambayo ilikuwa kwa nyumba imelowa na maji, na hata hatuna penye tunaweza toa tuanike ili ya kwamba tukapate kukula.
Mto Sabwani livunja ukingo wake, sasa maji yametuingilia kwa nyumba. Vile tuko hivi tumekaa tu kando, hata hatujui tufanye nini.
Tutaki kupoteza watoto wetu, hataki kupoteza wananchi wetu. Kama hapa kuna shule, watoto wameenda shule asubuhi, sasa hivi maji yamejaa, watapitia wapi wakirudi?
Ya wachagua wenye wako kwa serikali na wale wako kwa serikali ya kaunti waje hapo mashinani waweze kusikiliza hawa kinanga mama na hawa wazee waelekeze.
Almost 3,000 families kutoka kule juu Kapumboi mpaka huku na Manjalala zimeathirika. Tuna vacate watu kutoka kwa manyumba zao waende safe places. And again tunashirikiana na other partners. Red Cross wako kwa ground kuensure kwamba we create camps.
Former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has publicly praised the late former Prime Minister Raila Odinga for his leadership and legacy, marking one of his first detailed commendations on the matter. During the Ngemi Shiawadho Festival, a cultural gathering of lawyers and professionals from central Kenya, Gachagua described Odinga as a leader worthy of emulation. Addressing the audience, Gachagua lauded Odinga's ability to build the ODM party and sustain it as a major political force in Kenya.
As we mourn Raila Odinga, I must admit, I admire two things about that old man. And I'm really very touched by his leadership. Look at the political party that he built called ODM. A strong political party that though he has never been elected president, he is able to get into every government and get what he wants. Because he has a strong political party. But most importantly, his political party, all the legislators are top-notch lawyers. These are the people who have protected Raila Odinga for 30 years. If you look at Raila's team, James Orengo, Otieno Kajwang, late, Omolo Atiende, Karoli Omondi, Peter Kaluma, Edwin Sifuna, Stewart Matier, Catherine Muma, Mile Odhiambo, the bad girl, Beatrice Oyomo, Tom Ojieda, Okongo Mgeni, Mohamed Faki, Ochieng, and Babu Owino. Great minds. Great minds. Then nyinyi munanipatia Kawanjiko wa Matinga wa Makeki.
Chief Justice Martha Koome has described the late former Prime Minister Raila Odinga as a statesman whose unflinched belief in law and governance paved the way for Kenya's democratic journey. While leading a delegation from the Judiciary and the Judicial Service Commission to offer condolences to Mama Ida Odinga following Raila's passing, Koome praised his efforts to promote a new constitution and expand civic space. In the 1990s, efforts, she said, inspired generations to pursue change through the courts rather than conflict. She recalled representing him during his imprisonment in the 1980s.
Who helped me to come up was none other than Chief Justice Martha Koome. We started the journey with her. We did a lot of things with her. I'm not surprised that finally she became the Chief Justice of this country, because she has walked that right there.
Baba stood firm for the rule of law. Baba stood for fairness and justice. Baba fought for our constitution. That is our guiding light today.
I think another important thing that I want to mention is a person who had no grudge. They called him names, they harassed him, they put him in detention, but he came back without a grudge, and he worked.
Gachagua Rigathi has urged Kenyan professionals, particularly lawyers, to actively participate in politics and national leadership, arguing that only knowledgeable and principled leaders can safeguard the country's interests. Speaking at the Ngemishia Wadho Festival, a cultural event bringing together lawyers from central Kenya, the former deputy president said the region has suffered a leadership vacuum due to limited involvement of professionals in politics, giving room for what he termed as political novices to take charge. Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka, who also attended the event, echoed the call for political collaboration, stating that stability and adherence to the Constitution must remain a priority. Kalonzo urged that true patriots are those who operate within the law and uphold democratic values.
Deep trouble. We are under persecution by Githinji. Our community faces extinction. Our businesses have been ruined. Our agriculture, our tea, our coffee has been ruined. Pending bills of our people have not been paid. We are in trouble because we elected Tugege to the National Assembly and the Senate. That is why we are in trouble. If the people in this room had offered themselves for election, like Gasheri, like Kagushia, like Wakilimureu, our community will not be in the shit we are in.
We cannot have a country go down the drain while we call ourselves professionals. And so, I want to ask that election time, An election is not an event, it is a process. And the process of the next election, you know what happened with the selection? William Ruto led IBC. I remember that my friend Raila, may God rest his soul in peace, had agreed that they would produce Professor, I forget the name now, the professor who is a member of IBC Selection Commission, and then Koki Mulu was supposed to be in that. They wakachenga. Now we have a commission because you are sitting pretty. Now as we move on, I want to ask that all of you, living the spirit of the young Kenyans who have been abducted, put in those boots, charged under POTA, Prevention of Terrorism Act, where Mukunji and others were. And we went there with Gacheri and others and tried to do something. And we said no to that kind of administration of law in our country. Therefore, I want to urge that now prepare that the 55,000 polling stations in this country will be manned by, among others, lawyers, and particularly the young ones. In addition to going for those elected positions, tafadhalini, in addition for going for those elected positions, do also determine to make sure there will be no rigging, regardless of the fact that
President William Ruto has announced that the national government has officially taken over the construction of the Kakamega Teaching and Referral Hospital and will upgrade the facility to a national referral hospital upon completion. Ruto said the government has allocated 1 billion shillings to expedite the project, which is expected to be finalized within the next 10 months to serve the wider Western Kenya region. The head of state added that the government will equip the medical facility with modern equipment and directed the contractor to hire more than 1,000 young people to ensure timely completion. Ruto said the hospital will complement existing referral hospitals across the country and help strengthen universal healthcare.
Nimemweleza huyu ndugu yangu Baraza ya kwamba sasa hii hospitali kwa sababu ni kubwa aniwachie, inatoshana na mimi, nitengeneze, nimalize, ndio watu wa Kakamega wapate hospitali level 6 ambayo itashughulikia mambo ya matibabu ya watu wa Kakamega na Western Kenya. Nyinyi mnanielewa? Hii hospitali ni hospitali kubwa na inatoshana na sehemu hii ya Western Kenya. Hii hospitali itasaidiana na zile hospitali zingine referral, kama ile ya Moi Teaching kule Eldoret, kama ile ya Jaramogi Oginga Odinga hapa Kisumu. Sasa hii ndio itakuwa hospitali kubwa ya watu wa Western Kenya. Sawa? Na mimi nataka nimwambie yule mtu ambaye tumempatia kandarasi, si ndio? Mimi nataka nikuje hapa mwezi wa 11 nifungue hii hospitali ikiwa iko tayari. Sawa? Tumeelewana? Tumeelewana? Hii hospitali nimeweka pesa ya serikali shilingi bilioni 1 kukamilisha hii hospitali mahali ilivyo. Alafu pia nimekubaliana na bwana Baraza vile tutaweka equipment kwa hii hospitali. Wale watu wake wa afya ama health na wale wengine wote waanze kupanga taratibu ya the equipment that is required, so that through our next program we can begin to source for the equipment that will be used in this facility, because universal health coverage will be a reality if we have the facilities, if we have the hospitals with equipment, with the capability to undertake every health requirement of the people of Kenya, especially for this facility the people of Kakamega. Tumeelewana jameni? Na nimemwambia bwana contractor hapa. Mimi nataka nione vijana 1,000 wanafanya kazi kwa hii hospitali.
To matters education, Cabinet Secretary Julius Migos Ogamba has appealed to striking university lecturers and staff to return to work, urging them to accept the government's phased payment plan for their pending collective bargaining agreement dues. Speaking in Mombasa during the closing ceremony of the Kenya Association of Technical Training Institutions National Games, Ogamba said the government has shown goodwill by committing to settle the outstanding 7.7 billion shillings owed under the 2017 to 2021 CBA. He called on the university unions to embrace dialogue and resume duties immediately, noting that the ongoing industrial action is disrupting learning and affecting students across the country.
To a figure of 9.7, and we agreed we'll pay them 4.3 billion immediately, which we did, 7.3 in this financial year, and another 7.3 the next financial year. The 4.3 billion has been paid, the 2.7 billion has been paid. So government has shown good faith and commitment to settle these historical debts, which are not a debt that was incurred by the Kenya Kwanza administration, it was incurred before. So what we are trying to do is resolve all those pending issues so that going forward we do not have people going to the streets each and every time. We've done it with the other unions, we've done it with Kipet, we've done it with NAT, and everything is settled. And we will be able to do it with WASO. All we're asking them is for them to come to the table, look at the realities of the current situation, and accept.
All right, we take a quick break right here on Morning Live. Stay with us. When we come back, we'll be heading over to the newspapers. The headlines this morning are something that are quite conversational, so don't go too fast. Stay with us.
You are watching EBN TV, transforming your world. You are watching EBN TV, transforming your world.
EBN TV cares about the growth of your business. To advertise with us, call 0725 386 501 or 0740 653 453.
Good morning, welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. You're watching Morning Live. We're about to get into the local dailies this morning. I'd love to kick it off with the Standard newspaper. Tanzania massacre, that is the headline this morning. If Mwalimu Julius Nyerere were to return to the nation he built on the ideals of African unity, he would be horrified. As Tanzania's first female president fought to secure her own mandate, blood flowed across the land. Cut off from the world during and after polling, Tanzanians endured what rights group now described as a bloodbath that was hidden behind an official blackout but laid bare through reports shared with their Kenyan counterparts. And that is a story that is on page 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the Standard newspaper this morning as they continue to extensively cover the Tanzanian polls as well as the Tanzanian post-election effects after the incumbent Samia Suluhu Hassan arguably defended her seat, quote-unquote defended her seat, with 31 million people casting the votes on her, which reflected about 98% of the total tally of votes which she won. However, this has been a very different kind of election for Tanzania, as you know, just right from even the election date, Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan sort of stretched her hands to clamp down on civil rights groups, on human rights activists, on opposition figures, on clergy leaders who are voicing their concerns concerning the fairity or the fairness and the freeness of the election. And so the AU Commission has been accused of applauding carnage. The African Union has been accused of applauding carnage after its chairperson, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, dispatched a congratulatory message praising a contest that had no contestants and an election largely marred by bullets and blood. Now, in a press communication, the AU, supposedly the custodian of Africa's democratic charter, became one of the first to applaud Samia's quote-unquote victory. In a contrast image, the European Union, on its part, expressed concern over the high number of deaths that have been reported, the high number of injuries that have been reported, the arrests and detentions that have been reported in Tanzania, as well as the extrajudicial killings. And, it's sort of a stark contrast, really, of what the African Union is saying, as well as what the European Union is saying. And so the AU has really been blasted over that particular sentiment of congratulating a leader when, there are reports coming out of Tanzania that are worrying. And so just to paint a picture, the internet in Tanzania was shut down for a number of days. And essentially the information that comes out is when there's just a bit of leeway for them to be able to access internet. But they have been in darkness as well, without lights. They have been without internet, as well as without freedom of expression. And so for 5 days since the country went to the polls, the internet is yet to be fully restored, with Tanzania's Foreign Minister Mahmoud Thabit Kombo defending the shutdown as a plan to stop vandalism. In his words, and I quote, he says, "Shutting down the internet and locking down the country so you can kill people who supposedly voted for you is diabolical." That's actually the words of Tito Magoti, an international human rights lawyer based in Dar es Salaam. Now, some rights group and opposition figures have estimated that as many as 1,000 people may have been killed. Some have been shot in the back. It is also reported that a few Kenyans could also have been victims of this particular bloodbath. John Okoth Ogutu, a Kenyan teacher attached to Sky Schools in Dar es Salaam, is among those whose family are pleading with the government to help bring their loved ones back home for burial, as they are fearful that he may be buried within a mass grave. So the streets of Tanzania's major towns, including Dar es Salaam, have for the last few days been stained with blood and littered with bodies in what is described as the country's deadliest election since independence. Investigation by The Standard has unearthed graphic footage and images verified by international human rights organizations capturing the horror crackdown. They show victims with various degrees of injuries inflicted by security forces who fired live rounds into unarmed demonstrators. Now, what we are seeing is perhaps just a clawback on the democracy that had been gained in Tanzania for over 60 years, with one of the founding fathers, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, who was such a democratic voice, not just for Tanzania, but for Africa. And so if you listen to just what activists are saying, if he were to be alive right now, then he would be shocked and horrified at just what is happening in his own land. Now, Chadema, the opposition party, which is led by Tundu Lissu, has distanced, itself from the results and said, there was no election that actually took place. And so this is a sham poll of an election. Now, we're also looking at a situation where activists are now calling for the International Criminal Justice to come in and just investigate this, and as well as the intervention of the International Criminal Court. The international human rights observers now warn that the scale of violence unfolding in Tanzania has crossed the threshold of domestic law and entered the realm of the international criminal justice. The brutality, they say, bears all the hallmarks of crimes against humanity systematic, deliberate, and state-sponsored that would warrant the intervention of the International Criminal Court. So that is the headline that just paints the picture of Tanzania massacre. Reports indicate that at least 1,000 people have been killed. However, the government on its part says there's no such thing as those number of deaths that have been recorded, and say that those participating in the demonstrations are just not responsible and not patriotic people. Now, Tanzania hit by more protests, deaths, riots, that is also one of the stories, as well as Jewel of Swahili poetry tested as Suluhu's leadership exposes ungwana hypocrisy. And so she's one of the leaders that, you know, one would have hoped would have performed otherwise in the run-up to the 2025 polls. Remember, she got into office after the death of John Pombe Magufuli. By the way, interestingly, as a duo, when they were elected back in 2021, they garnered 8 million votes. The opposition garnered about 6 million votes. And so that huge jump as well raises a lot of eyebrows because, I mean, from 8 million votes to 31 million votes in total, the math is really not there, because if you look at just the trend, essentially, even if we've got new people registering for votes often more than not. And even if, yes, you did win the election, not by that margin. I mean, you got 31 million votes, and the next closest opponent, we say, gets about 238,000 votes. It's just not practical, at least not in a democratic space, and at least not within the right way of voting. If you look at Kenya and the trend, you know, you move from about 4 million people voting you in, and then there's a huge jump. You get to just 8 million vote or 6 million voting you in, and that was the gap between 2017 and 2022 elections. The Uhuru Ruto ticket was voted in by roughly about 5 million Kenyans. Come to 2022, the Ruto regime was voted in by roughly about 6.2 million Kenyans. So there's just about 1.2 million jump. And so come 2027, that number, yes, will be higher, but will it be at the totality of just almost what all the total population of Kenyans are? I mean, it's just not practical, it's unrealistic, it's not mathematically possible. And so those are one of the things that, you know, raises eyebrows as well across the continent about these particular elections. Now to a different story on the Standard. KCSE candidates begin written exams today amid tight security. The 2024 KCSE examinations kick off today with English paper 1 in the morning and chemistry paper 1 in the afternoon, separated by a 4-hour break. The exercise will test more than 900,000 candidates, which concludes on November 21st with physics paper 3, a practical examination. And remember, it's not just them who are some of the candidates that had been sitting for the exams, but we also had KJSEA, the Kenya Junior School Education Assessment, as well as the Kenya Primary School Education Assessment. So technically, we had over 3 million candidates sitting for their papers just this year across various education levels. And so for the KCSE, this is one of the longest one. We'll be doing this and it just remains 2 KCSE classes, the KCSE class of 2026 as well as the KCSE class of 2027, before 844 is subsequently completely phased out. And so amidst that as well, we had the lecturer strike, which continues, and some of the universities opted to send students home, even as the lecturer strike persists, and students are decrying, you know, delays in just completing their courses. Some were set to complete in 2026, perhaps April, but now that has been pushed forward to August, and they say, no, this does not really add value in their hands. So that is the headline as well. Now, mudslides rekindle memories of tragedies that have rocked Elgeyo Marakwet, as 26 people dead on Friday night and Saturday morning, following a deluge which descended on the escarpments. The mudslides swept through 3 villages, or 3 wards actually, in Elgeyo Marakwet, killing 26 people and displacing 200 families. But the picturesque escarpments have remained a death trap where for decades hundreds of residents have been buried in a series of disasters triggered by heavy rains. So I'd love us to listen into just, you know, the details from the Elgeyo Marakwet and the recovery and the rescue operations as well, with the CS for Interior, Kipchumba Murkomen, who revisited the scene as well yesterday, that is on Sunday. Let's just listen in to paint a picture of just what exactly we are looking at, what we are dealing with as a nation.
Tumepoteza 26 people ambao wamepatikana. Pia tumeambiwa ya kwamba watu 25 bado wamepotea, na watu 26 ni wale ambao wamepelekwa kutibiwa hospitali.
Our Ngao officers, our county commissioners, the regional commissioner is well briefed to make sure that we give out early warning and an alert to everybody to go to safe ground. Today, I think the search should be able to lead us to a number of persons who are missing. And you know, in law, you cannot say they are dead until they are established that that has happened. So the missing persons will continue being searched. It is very sad, by the way, that some families lost 5, 6, immediate family members. So it's not a very easy thing.
Those who have been injured, the government of Kenya is going to pay all the hospital bills. For those who have lost their lives, the families who are grieving, the government of Kenya is going to stand with all these families who are grieving at the moment to ensure we have a proper and decent send-off.
All right, so that is the situation from Elgeyo Marakwet, and it's quite worrying because we've now entered a rainy season, and who knows when it will end, and it's a question of are we able to prevent these sort of tragedies from happening across various places? And so there are also calls to relocate people from mudslide prone areas or areas that are likely to experience mudslides of tragic levels. So that is some of the headlines on the Standard newspaper. Now let's switch to the Daily Nation, which has gone political this morning. Oburu, it's DP or nothing. Now that's a bombshell as ODM interim leader Oburu Oginga has drawn a bold red line in Kenya's post-Raila Odinga politics, declaring that the party will not settle for anything less than the deputy president's seat in 2027. For both President William Ruto and the United Opposition, this proposition comes with some tough and consequential political arithmetic. So that is a story that is on page 4 and 5 of the Nation. Now, the country continues to grapple with the post-Odinga political landscape, and how it's going to look like definitely has not been structured yet. It's been a couple of days since he passed away, and so it's still sort of alignments and realignments, and the mourning period continues. We've seen various leaders who continue to pay tribute to the home of Ida Odinga in Bondo, Siaya County, and so the country is still slowly trying to understand how this era is going to look like and what is going to change, what is not going to change, especially looking at the Man Odinga wars and sort of the political power he had across the country. Now, Oburu, who's his brother, as well as the interim party leader of ODM, has now come out. He had an exclusive interview with a local TV station and says, as the ODM party, they will not settle for anything lesser than the deputy presidency seat in the run-up to 2027. Now, this could be both detrimental for the party as well as such a strong position or stance that the party has taken, and could be a boost as well for the party. But one thing he says remains clear is that when Odinga died, his wish was that the ODM party will not go back to the opposition. And so what does that tell you? That they've got one way or the other to either be the government come 2027 or be in government. Now, they're already in government because of the broad-based working arrangement. The question is, will they forfeit that and decide to go for the government themselves? Will they be the king makers, or will they be the king come 2027? Now, he has also talked about the 10-point agenda within the broad-based government, what they signed with UDA early this year in March, UDA ODM 10-point agenda. He says this is what guides this particular agreement, and that if any of the agreement is forfeited, then that subsequently forfeits the broad-based working arrangement. However, that is to be seen, because we still are recording, you know, high economic downfall within the country. We're also recording extrajudicial killings, and you know, those are one of the points within the 10-point agenda which have not been fulfilled. And so for Oginga Oburu to say this, then it definitely is a catch-22 situation for the president, because we're looking at a president who needs ODM, and we're also looking at a president who needs Mount Kenya, and subsequently we're looking at a president who needs Western Kenya, as well as a president who will need Luo Nyanza region. Now for Western Kenya, we've seen of talks of also them saying they're not going to take anything less than a deputy presidency seat, and if they do so, then it throws into perspective that they will always come a third or a distant third or a distant fourth. Will always get, you know, the extensive of cabinet positions, the extensive of a prime cabinet secretary position. Now for Mount Kenya, this is going to also as well be a huge problem, because for a nation that has not had anything less than the deputy president seat for more than 20 years now, it's going to also be a huge test for Ruto. Because, okay, what does he do with the sort of unrestive Mount Kenya region? If, you know, they give ODM party the deputy presidents or the running mate slot, then what happens to Mount Kenya? Are they willing to take anything less than that? I mean, they had a president in 2002, they had a president in 2007, had a president in 2013, had a president in 2017, as well as a running mate in 2022. So the least they have taken is a running mate position. And so they'll be thinking that, okay, if we're going to support Ruto, then the least we can take is the running mate position. But now you're having ODM who says, okay, if we're going to support this working arrangement, then also the least we'll take is what? A running mate position. So a lot of things will be going through Ruto's mind in the run-up to 2027, but one thing we can, of course, talk about is that there can only be one running mate position, and then a promise of various positions within the rest. And so who is going to falter and who's going to take less? Will it be Mount Kenya? Will it be Luo Nyanza? Will it be Western Kenya? And so that is the aspect of this particular conversation that Oburu has begun. He also defended Sifuna, saying that what Sifuna speaks about is a reflection of the party's position. And this is what he said, and I quote, Sifuna was within his right to say that the party has not made a position about 2027. That is the current position on the matter. And he said, dismissing any talks of plots to remove the SG, says that those are ill-timed as divisive. So that is the headline this morning. Oburu says it's DP or nothing, and this will also be tough for the united opposition, who also now have to, you know, deal with that, because, you know, the election is a game of numbers, and I know my friend George Ngaira, who will be here today this morning, would have really talked to you about it and what it means, because election is a game of numbers, and it will be about who will bring the numbers to the table. Who will bring the Eastern voting bloc? Who will bring the Coastal voting bloc? Who will bring the Luo Nyanza voting bloc? The Western voting bloc? The Central Kenya voting bloc? As well as the Northeastern voting bloc? And it's a question of which region was going to stand by who. And so it's quite going to be an interesting couple of months ahead in the run-up to 2027. And there are going to be a lot of realignments, coalitions and alliances, because you cannot win an election as a single person or as a single party. You need to come together as many parties, and that's what exactly happened with the Kenya Kwanza coalition. We had the predominant UDA party, and then party like, you know, Chama cha Kazi or Chama cha Mashinani party. You also had, you know, MCC party. And so that is how election works, and it'll be interesting to see how many come in to just work with various alignments. And so that is the headline on top of the page. They also speak about Chadema reject poll results as Ruto silence on vote question. Now the president is yet to send a congratulatory message to Samia Suluhu, and one can only speculate why. And this is perhaps because of, you know, just the controversies around this election. and what it would mean for him to congratulate Samia Suluhu Hassan. Actually, not many leaders have congratulated him. Just the AU, which, you know, has put in a position, has extended their stance on just what this means. And so that is the headline on top of the page this morning. Quite similarly as well, the landslide death, which is at 26. And those are some of the headlines this morning, even as President William Ruto ended his tour of the Western Kenya. So that marks the end of our programming this morning on the newspaper review. I hope you're duly informed and brought up to speed on what is making headlines across the country. Allow me to wrap it up at that point. My name is Cynthia Nanjala. Have yourself a wonderful morning ahead. See you at 1 p.m. for the news.